Welcome to the Soul and Ebony Love Stories. The channel will bring you stories of strong bonds, cultural differences, passionate love, and unforgettable dramatic events. If you love interracial love stories and cinematic storytelling, then this is the place for you. Enjoy listening. Please subscribe to the channel to hear more great stories. I signed the contract with a hand that would not stop shaking, and I did it anyway because the alternative was watching my brother die under fluorescent lights that never turned off. The ICU smelled like antiseptic and quiet panic, the kind that sits in your chest and does not leave. Machines kept time better than clocks. Beep. Pause. Beep. I stood beside his bed, staring at numbers I could not control for the first time in my life. Oxygen levels, heart rate, blood pressure, all of it slipping in ways I could not fix with training or experience. I am a nurse. I know how to stabilize a body. I do not know how to fight a system that puts a price tag on survival. $300,000. That was the number the surgeon gave me. Calm, practiced, detached. Without the procedure, he said, your brother does not make it. I asked about insurance. Denied. I asked about payment plans. Too late. I called every bank I had ever trusted. Declined. I emptied every account I had. It was not even close. By the time I stepped into the hallway, my legs felt hollow, like I was already collapsing but had not hit the ground yet. That was when I saw the message. Not on a billboard. Not on a flyer. Just a clean, simple email that should have gone to spam but did not. Financial relief when no one else says yes. I almost deleted it. Almost. But desperation rewires logic in ways you do not notice until it is too late. I clicked. The process was fast, too fast, like it had been designed for people who could not afford to think. Minimal questions. No judgment. Just numbers, signatures, confirmation. The contract appeared on my screen, dense, precise, full of language that should have slowed me down. I skimmed it, my eyes catching phrases but not holding them. Immediate disbursement. Flexible repayment. Alternative settlement options. I should have read every word. I did not. Because behind me, through a glass wall, I could see my brother's chest rising and falling like it was already struggling to remember how. I signed. The funds hit within minutes. The surgery was scheduled within the hour. And for a brief moment, I felt something close to relief, sharp and fragile, like glass that might shatter if I breathed too hard. I chose his life. That is what I told myself. That is what I needed to believe. 3 days later, I was back in my apartment, still in scrubs, running on coffee and adrenaline that had nowhere left to go. My brother was stable. Alive. That should have been the end of it. It was not. My phone buzzed with a notification I did not recognize. Not a bill. Not a reminder. A contract update. I frowned, opening the document again, slower this time, my exhaustion peeling back just enough for clarity to slip in. The words were the same, but now I saw them. Really saw them. Binding labor clause. Obligation in lieu of monetary repayment. No unilateral termination. My breath caught, sharp and sudden. I scrolled faster, heart pounding harder with every line. This was not a loan. This was ownership, written cleanly enough to pass as legality. A knock sounded at my door before I could process the rest. Not loud. Not urgent. Certain. I froze where I stood, the contract still glowing in my hand, every instinct telling me that whatever was on the other side of that door was not there to negotiate. I saved my brother. But I had just signed myself away. I did not open the door right away. I stood there, frozen between instinct and reality, staring at the words still glowing on my phone like they might rearrange themselves into something less terrifying if I waited long enough. They did not. The knock came again. Same rhythm, calm, patient, like whoever was on the other side already knew I would answer eventually. I forced myself to move, each step heavier than it should have been, my pulse loud in my ears. When I opened the door, the man standing there did not look like a threat. That was the first problem. A man in his late 30s to early 40s. Clean suit, neutral expression. Posture relaxed in a way that suggested control, not comfort. Miss Hale, he said, not asking. I nodded slowly, my grip tightening around my phone. We need to discuss your agreement. The word agreement landed wrong, too soft for what I had just read. I stepped aside without thinking, letting him in, because some part of me already understood that refusing would not change anything. He walked in like he had done it before, like my space was already part of his. I closed the door behind him, the sound sharper than it should have been. "What is this?" I asked, holding up my phone, my voice steadier than I felt. "This clause." He glanced at the screen briefly, then back at me. "That is your repayment structure," he said. Calm. Neutral. Like he was explaining a billing cycle. I shook my head, a short, disbelieving motion. "No. This is not repayment. This is control." His expression did not change. "The contract was clear, Ms. Hale. In the absence of monetary repayment, labor obligations are activated. You signed willingly." The word willingly almost made me laugh, sharp and hollow. I signed under pressure. My brother was dying. His gaze held mine without flinching. And now he is not. The statement hit like a blade, clean and precise. I felt my jaw tighten, anger rising fast enough to burn through the shock. "That does not give you the right to own me," I said. His head tilted slightly, not in confusion, but in mild curiosity. "Own is an emotional interpretation. We prefer obligated." I let out a breath I did not realize I was holding, my hands starting to shake again, but not from fear this time. From rage. "I am not working for you," I said. "I am a nurse. I have a job. I have a life." He reached into his jacket and placed a thin folder on my table, deliberate, unhurried. "Your employment status has already been adjusted," he said. I stared at him, then at the folder, my stomach dropping before I even opened it. Inside was a notice from the hospital. Administrative leave. Effective immediately. Pending review. My vision blurred for a second, the room tilting just enough to make me grab the edge of the table. "You do not get to do that," I said, my voice lower now, dangerous in a way I had never heard it before. He met it without resistance. "We did not," he said. "Circumstances did. Your availability is now aligned with your contractual obligations." I laughed then, a short, bitter sound that surprised even me. Circumstances. That was the word they used when systems crushed people and no one wanted to take responsibility. My phone buzzed again in my hand. Another notification. My bank. Account access restricted. I did not need to open it to know. They were closing every door at once. "You are isolating me," I said quietly, the realization settling in fully now. "Financially. Professionally." He did not deny it. "We are ensuring compliance," he replied. Compliance. Another clean word for something ugly. I looked at him, really looked this time, searching for something human, something that suggested this could still be negotiated. I did not find it. "Who is behind this?" I asked. "Who do I actually owe?" A brief pause. Not hesitation. Selection. Then he answered. Choi Hyun-suk. The name meant nothing to me in that moment, but the weight behind it did. "And what does he want?" I asked. The man's expression remained perfectly composed. "Your time," he said. "Your skills. Your cooperation. Until the debt is considered resolved." I let the silence stretch, feeling the walls of my life closing in around me, every exit quietly sealed. "And if I refuse?" I asked. For the first time, something almost like sympathy flickered in his eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. "Refusal is not a functional option within the terms you accepted," he said. I looked down at the contract again, the words that had once looked like salvation now reading like a sentence. My chest rose and fell slowly, deliberately, as I forced myself to think past the panic, past the anger, into something colder. Systems like this only work if people stay trapped inside them. That meant they also had structure. And anything with structure could be understood. Maybe even broken. I closed the document, my reflection faint in the dark screen, eyes sharper now than they had been minutes ago. "Tell him I will meet him," I said. The man studied me for a second longer, as if reassessing something he had already categorized. Then he nodded once. "Tomorrow," he said. "You will be given the location." He turned and walked toward the door, pausing only briefly before leaving. As it closed behind him, The apartment felt different, smaller, like it no longer belonged to me in the way it had before. I stood there in the silence, the weight of what I had stepped into pressing down on every part of me. I had signed to save my brother. That part was done. Now I had to decide what I was willing to become to get my life back. And for the first time since this started, I understood something clearly. This was not just debt. This was a system designed to own people. And I was already inside it. I expected intimidation. I expected threats, raised voices, something obvious that I could push back against. What I did not expect was control, so quiet it felt like gravity. The address they sent led me to a building that did not need to announce itself. No signage, no noise, just glass and steel reflecting a version of the city that did not include people like me unless we were invited. I stood outside for a second longer than I should have, adjusting my jacket, forcing my breathing to slow. I was not here to beg. I was not here to submit. I was here to understand exactly what I had stepped into. The doors opened before I touched them. Of course they did. Inside, everything was precise. Clean lines, muted tones, a silence that was not empty but controlled. Someone was already waiting for me, guiding me without speaking, like I was expected, like I had always been part of the schedule. By the time I reached the office, I had already made one decision. I would not show fear. The door opened, and he was there. Choi Hyun-suk did not look up immediately. He finished reading whatever was in front of him, closed the folder, then raised his eyes to meet mine. It was not the kind of look that scanned or judged. It settled, measured, final. "So this is the nurse," he said, his voice calm, almost conversational, as if we were discussing something ordinary. I stepped forward, refusing to let the space between us define anything. "This is the person you think you own," I replied. His expression did not change, but something in his posture shifted, subtle, almost invisible. "Interesting," he said. "Most people start with fear." I held his gaze. Most people did not read the contract after signing it. A pause. Not long. Just enough to acknowledge the point. Then he leaned back slightly, studying me in a way that felt more analytical than threatening. "You understand what you agreed to," he said. It was not a question. "I understand that you design it to look like help," I said, "and function like a cage." A faint exhale left him, not quite a laugh. "Help and control are not mutually exclusive," he said. "People come to me when every legal system has failed them. I provide a solution. And in return, I take something of equal value." "Your freedom is not equal value," I said, sharper now. "It is everything." He tilted his head slightly, considering that. "To you," he said. "To others, survival is everything. You chose correctly." The words landed harder than I expected, because they were true in a way I did not want to admit. I had chosen my brother's life without hesitation. I would do it again. That did not make what he built acceptable. It just made it effective. "I am not working for you," I said, the words clear, steady. "Not like this." He did not respond immediately. Instead, he reached for a document on his desk and turned it toward me. "Your current balance," he said. I glanced down despite myself. The number was higher than what I had borrowed. Interest. Fees. Adjustments I did not recognize. "You inflated this," I said. "You signed the terms," he replied. "Every calculation is consistent with your agreement." I looked back at him, anger rising again, but now it had direction. "You built this so no one could ever pay it back," I said. "So they stay trapped. That is the point." Silence followed, heavy but not uncomfortable for him. For me, it sharpened everything. Then he spoke again, his tone unchanged. "There are ways to reduce the balance." "I already know what you are going to say." I cut in. "Work for you." He inclined his head slightly. "Yes." I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to think past the anger. If I walked out now, nothing would change. They would tighten control, escalate pressure, and eventually break me into compliance anyway. That was how systems like this worked. But if I stepped inside it, if I understood it fully, I might find where it failed. I met his eyes again, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make the shift deliberate. "Fine," I said. "I will work. The words tasted wrong, but I did not let that show. His gaze sharpened slightly, interest replacing neutrality. On my terms, I added. That earned a reaction, small but real. You do not set terms here, he said. I stepped closer, closing the distance he had been controlling since I walked in. Then do not expect obedience, I replied. If you want results, you let me operate the way I know how. I am not one of your assets. I am the person who can make your system more efficient, or expose where it breaks. Another pause. Longer this time. He was recalculating. I could see it. You believe you can improve what I built, he said. I believe I can understand it, I answered. And anything understood can be changed. For a moment, something almost like respect flickered in his expression, gone before it could settle. You are either very confident, he said, or very reckless. Both, I said. That seemed to satisfy something in him. He stood then, slow, deliberate, the shift in height and presence immediate without being forced. If you fail, he said, your debt increases. If you succeed, it decreases. That is the only adjustment I will make. I held his gaze, not backing down. And if I walk away, I asked. His answer came without hesitation. You will not. The certainty in his voice should have unsettled me more than it did. Instead, it clarified something. He was used to control, used to inevitability. That was where systems like his always made mistakes. They assumed people would break the same way every time. He extended his hand, not as a gesture of partnership, but as confirmation. Then we begin, he said. I looked at it for a second, then took it. Not because I accepted what he was offering, but because I needed access to destroy it. As his grip tightened briefly before releasing, I realized something I had not expected. He was not just testing me. He was curious. And curiosity in someone like him was dangerous in ways I could not yet measure. Break my system, he said quietly, as if the challenge was more interesting than the outcome. If you can survive it. I did not answer. I did not need to. I had already made my decision. I would not survive it. I would rewrite it. The first week inside his system did not feel like control. It felt like clarity, and that was the most dangerous part. I expected chaos, violence, something obvious I could resist. Instead, everything was structured, efficient, disturbingly precise. People came in desperate and left quieter, not because they were saved, but because they understood they had no other options left. I sat behind a desk that was not mine, reviewing files that should not have existed, each one a life reduced to numbers and conditions. Medical debt, frozen assets, legal barriers that turned emergencies into traps. And every single case followed the same pattern. Desperation, agreement, entrapment. I told myself I was here to learn, to map it, to find the fracture point. But the more I read, the more I understood why it worked. It was not built on force. It was built on need. That made it stronger than anything brute could achieve. I kept my expression neutral, my voice controlled, even when something inside me twisted at what I was seeing. You adapt quickly, Hyun-suk said one afternoon, his presence announced not by sound, but by the way the room seemed to recalibrate around him. I did not look up immediately. I understand systems, I replied. That is all this is. A system. A faint pause. Then his voice again, quieter. Most people call it survival. I closed the file in front of me, finally meeting his gaze. Survival should not come with ownership, I said. He held my eyes for a second longer than usual, something unreadable passing through them before it settled back into control. And yet they still sign, he said. That was the part that never left me. He was not wrong. They always signed, just like I had. I shifted my focus back to the screen, but now I was not just reading. I was tracing. Every contract, every clause, every pathway that connected one case to another. It was bigger than I thought. Lawyers structured the agreements to sit just inside legality. Financial institutions quietly benefited from the overflow. Even regulatory gaps were accounted for, built into the design like intentional blind spots. This was not just a criminal operation. It was an ecosystem. And ecosystems always had dependencies. That was where they broke. The first crack revealed itself late at night, when most of the building had gone quiet. I was reviewing a cluster of contracts flagged for escalation when I noticed something small. A variation in language between jurisdictions. Subtle. Almost invisible. But not identical. I leaned closer, my pulse steady, my mind sharpening. Different states enforced debt labor clauses under different interpretations. Some allowed broader definitions. Others restricted them under federal labor protection laws. It was not a flaw. Not yet. But it was a mismatch. And mismatches created openings. I pulled more files, cross-referencing, building a pattern. The same clause written 3 different ways, depending on where the contract would be enforced. That meant one thing. The system was not unified. It was adapted. And anything adapted could be forced into contradiction. You are thinking too loudly. His voice cut through the silence behind me. I did not turn. I am thinking correctly, I replied. A chair shifted as he sat across from me, his attention now fully on what I was doing. Show me, he said. I hesitated for half a second. Not because I feared him, but because I understood the line I was walking. Then I turned the screen toward him. These clauses, I said, pointing to the variations. They're not consistent. He glanced at them, expression unchanged, but I saw the recognition in the slight narrowing of his eyes. Different jurisdictions, he said. Necessary flexibility. It is not flexibility, I replied. It is vulnerability. That earned his full attention. Explain. I leaned back slightly, keeping my voice even. If a contract binds someone under one interpretation, but violates federal protections under another, it creates a legal contradiction. One that can be challenged. Not by the borrower. By someone with access to the full structure. Silence followed, heavier now. Not empty. Calculating. You are suggesting dismantling the system from within its own framework, he said. I met his gaze without hesitation. I am suggesting you built something efficient, but not perfect. And perfection is the only thing that survives scrutiny. For a moment, something shifted in him again, deeper this time. Not just interest. Something closer to respect, edged with something darker. You are dangerous, he said quietly. Only to systems that rely on people not understanding them, I answered. He held my gaze longer than before, the silence stretching in a way that felt almost personal now. You are not trying to reduce your debt, he said. You are trying to break it. I did not deny it. That would have been pointless. Yes, I said simply. The words settled between us, sharp and irreversible. And if you succeed, he asked, his voice lower now, what do you think happens next? I did not look away. Everything changes, I said. For them. For you. For me. Another pause. Then he leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly, as if weighing something far beyond what was visible. You assume I want it to remain unchanged, he said. That caught me off guard, not because of the words, but because of the honesty behind them. Then why build it like this, I asked. His gaze did not waver. Because this is the only way it survives in the world that exists, he said. The answer was not defensive. It was factual. That made it harder to dismiss. But it did not change what I needed to do. I turned back to the screen, my fingers already moving again, mapping the contradictions, building something new from the fractures I had found. Behind me, I could feel his presence, not stopping me, not interfering, just watching. Not as an owner. Not as a controller. As someone waiting to see what I would become inside the system he created. And for the first time, I realized something I had not expected. He was not just testing my limits. He was testing his own. That made this more dangerous than I had planned for. Because if I was right, if I could force the system to collapse under its own rules, I would not just be freeing myself. I would be taking something from him he had never lost before. Control. And people like him did not lose control quietly. I did not wait for permission when I triggered it. Systems like his were built on the assumption that no one inside would ever challenge the foundation. That was the mistake I had been waiting for. I initiated the legal escalation through channels he himself had approved, cross-jurisdiction filings, federal labor violations, contractual contradictions submitted as evidence rather than complaints. Every clause he relied on became a liability the moment it was forced into the same legal frame. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the system reacted. Alerts fired across internal dashboards, accounts flagged, transactions paused, assets placed under temporary review. Not by me. By the very structures he had designed to protect himself. I stood in the conference room when it hit full effect, the tension sharp enough to feel in the air. Lawyers started calling. Financial partners demanded clarification. Frozen accounts began stacking faster than anyone could respond. And at the center of it, him. Choi Hyun-suk did not move at first. He stood there, watching the screens, the collapse unfolding in precise, irreversible increments. For the first time since I met him, he was not in control of the outcome. "You did this," he said finally, his voice calm but heavier now, like something fundamental had shifted. I met his gaze without hesitation. "No," I said. "I enforced the contract." The words landed exactly where they needed to. Not as an attack. As truth. He exhaled slowly. I still locked on mine, something darker and more complex settling behind them. "You understand what you have taken," he said. "I do," I answered. Control. The room fell silent around us, not because people stopped moving, but because none of it mattered compared to what had just happened. His system was still standing, but it was no longer untouchable. That was enough. For now. He stepped closer, not threatening, not retreating, just closing the distance like he needed to see something more clearly. "You could have walked away," he said quietly. "Reduced your debt. Lived your life." I shook my head slightly. "That was never an option," I said. "Not for me. Not for anyone trapped in this." Another pause, but this one felt different. Not calculation. Recognition. Then something else, something I had not expected. Not anger. Not even resentment. Respect. Sharp, unwilling, but real. "You broke it," he said. "Not everything," I replied. "Just enough." His gaze held mine a second longer, then shifted, not away, but forward, like he was already thinking about what came next. "Systems do not disappear," he said. "They adapt." I nodded once. "Then so will I." That was the moment the dynamic changed completely. I was no longer inside his system. I was outside it, and standing directly in front of him without anything binding me there. Free. The word felt unfamiliar, heavier than I expected. I turned slightly, looking at the screens one last time, the frozen accounts, the exposed structure, the cracks that would not close cleanly again. He tried to own my life. That was how this started. But contracts go both ways. And he forgot something critical. The person who understands the terms always has the final move. I walked away without asking for permission, without waiting to see if he would stop me. He did not. And somehow, that said more than anything else could have. I rewrote the terms. I thought freedom would feel light. It did not. It felt heavy, like something earned the hard way, something that came with consequences I could not undo. The system did not vanish overnight. People would still fall into traps like the one I escaped. But now there was a crack, a weakness that could not be hidden again. And that was enough for me to keep going. I did not just survive it. I changed it. Maybe not completely, but enough to prove it could be broken. So now I want to ask you something. If you were in my place, would you sign that contract to save someone you love, knowing it could cost your freedom? Or would you walk away and live with that choice forever? Tell me in the comments. And if this story pulled you in, if you felt every decision, every risk, every moment of control shifting, do not forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me. Because the next story might hit even closer.